Hola, ¿qué tal a todos? Soy Diego Mendoza, a nombre del Festival Stop Motion MX en el marco de la 9ª edición que celebramos del 24 al 26 de noviembre en el Centro Nacional de las Artes, Centro de Capacitación Cinematográfica y Universidad de la Comunicación. Le doy la bienvenida a la plática con Jim Randall, especialista en puppets y además, bueno, de hacer animatrónicos para parques temáticos. Jim, welcome to the festival, the Stop Motion Festival. Thank you for being here. Well, you can start your talk about what we will talk about armatures of stop motion whenever you want. Welcome.
Thank you. So I brought a bunch of things to show, so I can start showing those if you like.
Yeah. What do you want to show us right now, Jim? What do you have over there?
I have these type of armatures. This is an 8-inch tall armature. Done
Okay.
with aluminum, bronze, stainless steel, and those are the materials I use the most. And if there's a big piece of metal, I'll switch over to aluminum. So this is some really big joints. These are 3/4-inch joints. And if you made this in anything else in material, it would weigh a lot for the puppet. So I end up doing some things in aluminum.
In your beginnings, what did you start to do?
In my career?
Yeah, in your career.
The first real career job I had was working for the theme park industry. So I started that in the late 80s. I ended up doing sculpting, mainly mold making, fabrication. Did that for up until around 2003, and then did freelance work, that type of work for small theme parks. And when I started seeing a lot more stop motion festivals or films, I ended up, learning how to make the armatures. And so a progression of trial and error. And when I had something that was neat, I would show people, and it worked.
It's difficult to make armatures. Well, if you started in your house, as I know, which was the most difficult thing that you have looked and understand when you are making an armature in your house when you begin? Which was the problem that you found?
Well, I would say the design is kind of fun. Everything's kind of standard, joints look the same. It's just when things get reconfigured, where you might need a swivel on an arm on top of a ball joint. And the other thing that's kind of a challenge for me is just the actual machining at the beginning, because I'm all self-taught. So I had to learn how to do the machining correctly, which I basically still learning all the time.
You have a project that you told me that you started a long time. I saw the armature. If you can show it, the
Yeah.
troll. That's in a big complex piece.
Oh, the big one?
You have many of them. The troll and the other one of the creep show.
Let me start with some of the smaller things. These are just some legs. I repurposed the hip for this other armature, but just learning the geometry of how a joint works. And as I got better making joints, I did different styles of joints. In the toe, there's what they call kind of a pin swivel in the toe instead of a hinge. So those were easy to do. That's what's in the knee. And then as I got better machining, the hinge joints were working quite well. So I ended up doing mostly the hinge joints. The pin joints are still a great joint to do because they are easy. The hip in this character actually came off of this. So I started an armature with just up to the hips. Then I wanted to do something like a creature. So I ended up kind of taking whatever joints I had and turning it into a weird looking creature that eventually I like to finish off as a finished model and maybe do some animation. I'm not an animator, but in high school, I used to do some animation with clay, and then we learned how to make rubber puppets with wire armatures. That's how I started. And since I learned or had a machine shop now at home, I wanted to get more advanced. So I wanted to do things like this.
And about the most complex things that you have made?
Yeah, the complex thing started because of the movie Corpse Bride. And I do like little, making mechanisms. I think that has something to do with my love for the robotics. So what ended up happening is, being inspired by what was done in Corpse Bride, I did some prototypes of my own design because they had like a lead screw in the ear. They would access in the ears to do the smile and the frown. The top of the head would do the jaw. Then they had little paddles for the rest of it. I wanted to do something a little different. So I ended up, this is like the real first prototype that I did. And it works, it works on little screws that turn, that just spin, and then the nut goes up and down. So when you do that, and you have a wrench, if you look at it, see, this is the jaw. So if you can, okay, let's see if I can find the jaw on this. It's been a long time since I played with these things. So if you can see that, slowly the jaw is moving.
Up, yeah.
Okay. So this is like the first real prototype I did. And then another project, personal project, I wanted to do a more advanced piece, and that's where this guy came from. This is a little troll that I did. He only got as far as this. It started with the sculpture. There's lots of pictures of this on my social media. So if anybody wants to learn a little bit of that, they can do that. So that was the armature for it. So it works the same way. Access the top of the head with the little wrenches, and you can do eyebrow, smile, frown. The bottom lip goes in and out, jaw opens. I got a chin in there, and actually the eyes, which aren't connected to anything, but I was going to do something mechanical with that so they could actually blink and look up, down, and left and right. So this was like the first thing. This was small enough that I could always bring with me to a festival and show people every year. Somebody new is at the festival. So it wasn't too bad showing the same thing over and over again. But that was a project that hopefully someday I'll continue with. This is the silicone skin. This is what he kind of looks like. And this is just the test skin. I still need to do mold making stuff, alterations to make a good skin, but this is as far as I got. And this is quite a few years ago now that I did that. It could be like, 12 years ago. I can't remember, but and another mechanical head I was doing was this one. Another unfinished project, but it was kind of fun. So it has a lot of the same features, a little more complicated. I actually have a little side to side motion for the jaw. So that was kind of fun to figure that out. So I just like all the armatures I do, a lot of them tend to have some kind of mechanical function to them.
Do you miss something of them parks while doing the armatures? Because you learned a lot. That's obviously that you learned mold making and everything. But do you miss something of that?
Do I have any mold making stuff to show?
Yeah, and did you miss something of making the armatures of in the them parks or animatronics and all that stuff? Do you miss or not?
On that stuff, I didn't do that much machining in the theme park industry. That was all done afterwards. I did one character for that, and ended up doing most of my machining in the stop motion that I do, the armatures that I do. Does that answer your question?
I guess that's the correct question, the answer. If there's something that you have dreamed to make,
A completed character would be nice to do someday. I do have, I always have like little stories I like to do in animation. And of course, I would always start with the design and making the armatures and the puppets, because that's the fun part. Animation is something I don't do much of at all. So anything that I've tried recently in animation is very crude looking.
it's complex, no? It's complex to have the idea and to get it into there.
Yeah, yeah. What's neat about doing the little mechanical stuff is, you know, of course, puppets end up being very small creations to begin with. So it's kind of a good challenge for me to learn how to do a breathing mechanism. I did a breathing mechanism for a much bigger puppet, about 12 inches. And then after that, I had a breathing mechanism to do the puppet that was, you know, 3/4 of an body. And that's the turkey that hopefully people will look at some pictures on my Instagram. And that was fun to do because it was small, and it seems more impressive to do tiny things as opposed to big things.
Your work is impressive. Most of the things that you have made up and that you have there over there, the brick armatures and the smaller things that you have made. But do you have a recommendation for tools that people can use when starting?
Well, if you want to think of the basic armature tools, I mean, the better the equipment, the better your armatures are. So I have, you know, in my shop, I have a milling machine, I have a lathe, a bandsaw works good for cutting stock. It kind of starts with the basics. You have to learn the milling and the lathe work. And then from there, it's trial and error. You get something good, you kind of write down the measurements of that joint, and then you can reproduce it. A lot of armature people, or some people, when they start off, they could do simpler armatures with sandwich joints, which is 2 plates. I don't have an example of that. But 2-plate armatures are a lot easier. They can make those with open hole joints, which is basically the plate does not have a concave shape that the ball fits into. You can just do a hole and then just compress onto the ball. That's like the simplest way to get a metal armature made. But yeah, tools are a big thing, and it's an investment to do something like that. I mean, I actually want to upgrade my milling machine, which is I've had for almost 30 years, and I would like a bigger one, because the bigger it seems like the smaller the parts you do, the heavier the machine that you need.
And this is a big investment, as you said. It's a big investment to make something that small. Is the difference that it makes all the quality, the complexity of also that you have made in your beginnings. It's something that you get with the most simpler tools.
Yeah.
Or you use complex armatures that a friend gave you, or what happened?
I mean, I think armatures look complex because they're made of little components. So if you break down, like I even think of this, like, wow, how did I even make that? I don't remember. It was so long ago. But you break down each component into like a jar, then you build onto that. I think when people think about armatures, they see the whole picture. And when you look at the whole picture like that, the whole armature, it seems like, wow, can I do that? It's very complicated. But if you break everything down into small components and then it's assembled, it's kind of a good way to think, because it just makes it less daunting to build something like this if you break it down into small components.
They are a big component. In every of your armatures, most of the things that the heads that are really complex in Mexico, I think that we haven't get into there, because there's a complexity that you have learned through the years, that you have worked with other directors and people that knows about it. Do you have any director that you want to work with or dream to work with a studio?
The directors I've been working with lately, they're all short films. So some people might be in film school still. So it might be the thesis project. I've done that for a few people, and then they move on to, after school, they do another little film. So they end up being small films. I do like to seek out people that there's something about their filmmaking that I really like. Jean-Francois Levet who did the I, Barnaby film. I just love his designs. It was great to take that character and turn it into something mechanical that, looks alive. Really enjoyed working with him. It was good collaboration. And as I said, there's just people out there that you meet and it's like, oh, let's do something someday. So you end up hopefully working on a project together. It's great. I mean, through word of mouth, building a couple armatures from people that it's like, oh, how'd you find out about me? So it's usually somebody that I've worked with before, which is nice to hear.
And with Greg Nicotero, that you make the Creep Show, what happened? How did you get with him, or how did he get with you?
Well, through it wasn't directly for Greg, but Jim Davidson, who is, a lot of my contacts come from Facebook. It's a great way to get my work out there. So I get nice compliments over the armatures, but sometimes I get jobs. So Jim Davidson was hired by Greg Nicotero to do the animation for this project. And I just got a message from Jim saying, I got this project. I wonder if you want to build the armature for it, not knowing what it was at the time. He sent me a very simple pencil sketch of it. And then when I said, yeah, I'll do that, it was quite a challenge because I had to do it blindly, basically. The sculpture was all done. It was sculpted digitally. They made molds of it out in California at Greg Nicotero's shop, K&B. So I was only provided with a partial arm and a leg and just lots of drawings, which were done, images that were done in ZBrush. So you could take pretty good measurements off of that. And that the big challenge was doing that without having the advantage of doing it first before the sculpture. It was a big challenge. So not directly through Greg, but because of somebody on Facebook, Jim Davidson, who's been in the business for years, as he's done everything, makeup, miniatures, stop motion. And I was quite happy to have somebody like that ask me to build the armature for the Creep Show.
Okay. And still talking about that, which is your reference to make the armatures? Or in this case, it's kind of alien. And, but which is your reference, or what did you take in your mind to see, okay, it will work like this way, or in this way, I will make it bend like this or like that? Which is your reference?
As I said, the character's all designed. Even though it's a creature, it's basically human anatomy. It's got a ankle, knee, hip joints. So you just have to reconfigure it into the shape of the creature, which ended up being this very spindly character. And I guess the main thing is getting it to fit in an existing piece. It was just that one was just a big challenge.
And do you admire someone that is involved in armatures? You have an artist that you say, I want to be like him. I want to make something like him.
Oh, many. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yes. Oh, like people's names are not gonna come to me and stuff, but because of social media, some of these people that I used to read in magazines, I see a picture of the person, I would remember their name, and then it's like, here it is, 30 years later or whatever, and now these people are on social media, so I'm able to share the armatures I do, and sometimes, through Messenger, they might send me a picture of something that they did that was never published, so that's kind of neat. Tom Saint Amand is probably the first one that whose armatures really spoke to me because they were just beautiful. There's been many armature makers, especially now these days. There's so many productions of stop motion going on, and seeing what they do. It's like these people are doing wonderful work. But yeah, Tom Steinemann was the first one. Ray Harryhausen, obviously, but it was very hard. He never published pictures of his armatures, so it's always like, oh, a mystery. What does his armatures look like?
I know he have made, well, the taxidermy that he made in that time, that you don't know how he built up anything. Ray Harryhausen, it was something that how he did a crab to still move, no? That complex things.
Yeah,
And
I mean, he learned, I mean, because he met all the people that worked on the original King Kong, which is the movie that really inspired him. You know, he always says, I haven't been the same since when he saw that film. So being out in California, he was able to, you know, meet Willis O'Brien and eventually work with them. Marcel Delgado, who did the Kong puppets. But then there was Henry Cunningham, I think is one of the names that come to me, that did the armature making. All these great craftsmen were just, it's fun to look back and see what they've done 80 years ago. You know, it just, you know, it hasn't changed much. It just, some of the materials are different, but basically the characters are what change. It's taking a character that someone's created and trying to put an armature in there to make it do what they need it to do. It's a big collaboration too. You always have to like put a rig point on something. What is it going to do in the film? Is it going to jump? So you always have to take that into consideration. Like this piece is, it's really big, but this is part of the rig for the Bob character for Creep Show. So, you know, the character was attached to this piece here, went into the hip, and, you know, there's a little gear, worm gear here that he could animate. Jim Davidson, when he animated it, he could move that around. So it's a big consideration. Not just the armatures, it's like it has to be able to stand on its feet, it has to be able to jump, so you have to always think of how that's going to work out. Rigs are kind of a neat thing on its own, because if you look at credits like at Leica Studios, you have armature people and you have rigging people. They're all, you know, if it wasn't for the rigging, you know, the animator couldn't work, because they need all these jigs, especially these days. They have all sorts of movers for the characters to get the great animation that they're doing, and it kind of starts with having a good rigger too, as well as a good armature maker.
And you love making rigs too, or more or less?
It started, yes, I did make some rigs, very little, because I've only been doing this when I started playing around with my own stuff. You know, I don't think it's even been 15 years. Going way back, you know, when I first was really experimenting with trying to do professional armatures. Yeah, it's kind of neat. I'll show you this one. This is a character that I'm working on right now, and just to show you the rigging on here, it's a pretty heavy character. This is like, I think it's almost like 4 pounds by the time it's done. So you have to make a pretty strong rig, because the character is going to be supported by it, and it's got to go, you know, this way and always hold its position, you know. So I think rigging is kind of fun, because there's always some kind of mechanical element you have to do with it, like a winder or worm gears or like a rack and pinion type of thing. So I kind of like doing it, because I get a lot of satisfaction out of doing something. Oh, it actually works.
I know it's really complex. I didn't see that armature. Never. It's really big, and to
Yeah.
move it, I don't know how it's easier or difficult to move that complex armature.
Yeah, it's well, the interesting thing with this one is there's a lift mechanism in there, so this whole top part goes up and down little sections here. So that was quite fun to figure out. So, you know, you have a wrench and you just put it in there, and it very slowly raises up and down. So it's just another element of coolness that this armature can do. Of course, there's a lot of elements on here that I can't show you, but, you know, just coming up type of joints, it's been a challenge because, you know, a lot of these things I haven't made before, like this type of joint right here. It's a ball joint, but it's being sandwiched and coming out the side instead of a normal ball joint would be. These legs, the hinges had to look less like an armature joint that you would have seen in the past, even though there's still hinges and stuff, but it had a mechanical element to it because all this gets seen, it doesn't get covered up. That was the fun part of this. You know, there's swivels, hinges, there's a slide in here that works like a cylinder. That's kind of a neat thing to do. And of course, all the legs go up and down, side to side. So it's a fun one to do because you know this is going to be seen pretty much in the final puppet.
And did you feel proud about an specific armature that you say, this is the best you ever have made of them all?
I think for each armature I do, I'm always like, this is the coolest armature I've made so far, because the element of, you know, making something tiny, and it's just kind of neat to see such a tiny armature. And then something as big as this guy, it doesn't matter. It just has a lot of neat elements to it, which is the big challenge. There's a lot of pieces. After I do an armature, I end up with a whole little tub of parts that I redid because it's like not quite right. Didn't give me the motion I needed. So yeah, it's a ton of redo, and you can't get to that because it happens all the time.
You have written an armature that you are starting to make, and you have in the point that you ruined everything, that when in the making you said, oh, it's a total failure, I need to start again.
Yeah. With this one, I could probably point to the rigging here. I had a few rig points that I like to do. There's like square ones that people like to do with square tubing and in armatures. And it's the K and S tubing because it's telescopic tubing, so it can fit, you know, one can slide into the other one. So a square armature was better. I've done some rig points which are round that has a key in there, so it kind of locks in and tightens with the screw. I felt like for this armature, I wanted to, you know, go with the square one. So I redid, you know, there's 4 points all the way around this armature. So I redid those last week, and I'm a little happy with them. But even now I'm thinking, because it's such quite an armature, that maybe I could have done something even different with that. And that's basically like an actual bolt-on rig instead of like going into a tube, you know, just straight take a plate and another plate and bolt them together. And the animator can have several of these plates around here, like this one has 4. So that would be I think for a big puppet, something that's just bolted on like that would be a good thing to do. And I just recently thought of that, but I don't think I'm going to change it now.
You have invented something about that in any armature, I mean, and an invention that someone else have told you, how did you did that? Is an innovation for me, or never seen that before.
And can you give me an example of something that you're thinking about? Or
I don't know, a hinge, a joint, anything that you have invented in the armatures that you are the only one that have made that, or try to do that.
Yeah, I know. I don't think you can invent anything these days, because there's some joints that are based on, like these are called little universal joints. So there's no ball that's drilled. It's just like a sandwich on a ball going in opposite directions at 90 degrees to each other. You think, oh, that's cool. You know, I didn't come up with that. That's Ray Harryhausen had his Brontosaurus had legs, and I guess it was the neck and tails that had similar type of joints. So it's like, I think anything that I think I come up with, somebody has done it in the past. I just like to try to come up with a little twist on it, because I don't like to just copy somebody else's work. I want to put my own spin on it. So I guess maybe you can call those a little more, you know, original, maybe. I don't know.
It's your original version.
Yeah.
Everyone have their own version, I think, no?
Yeah.
And this is your kind of version.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here's a good example of this thing, I was doing an armature for somebody. It's like, oh, it'd be cool. I'll tell you the background is it's a scarecrow, but it has a pumpkin head. So that's kind of tells you the shape of it. And I said, oh, you know what would be cool is when he's animating, his head can kind of go up and down. So it's like a squash and stretch type of mechanism. So, you know, you do that. There's a few ways. So I came up with a simpler way, which is basically the top of the head is riding on the framework, which is basically a piece of plastic with two rods coming down. And so it can slide up and down on that. So to me, that's kind of like a simple way of doing it. So by just twisting something, and there's a lever arm on it, you get to, you know, the up and down motion because it's riding on two pins and it can only go in one direction. So that worked really well. I think I'll be using a similar mechanism for a puppet. Hopefully I'll be doing in the future for some, where they want the same thing, a squash and stretch. So you could do this another way. You could do it with, you know, lead screws. You could do the same thing. But I just wanted to try this. I just saw a mechanism that worked similar to that, and you adapt it to doing in stop motion. I get really inspired by just mechanical things. If you happen to look at something, it's like, oh, I'll have to like remember that, because like the jaw for this, for the twisting, I wanted to have one motion not be affected by the other. I came up with that idea by looking at the tail rotor of a helicopter, the way it spins, right? But then the propellers, I guess the blades can turn. Like, how is that made? You know, so by looking at pictures of that mechanism, I kind of filed that in my brain a little bit, and I, you know, wanted to use something like that in the future. So I ended up doing it for this character in the jaw. So you get inspired by other fields. You just look at pictures all the time, and then you're like, oh, I kind of like that. I can adapt that somehow to my armatures. And that's usually how it starts off. You know, you get inspired by, like I said, either somebody's armature that has been done before you, or a piece of machinery that works in manufacturing. It's, you know, reciprocating something that, like, oh, that works good for a squash and stretch mechanism. So yeah, just get inspired by so much.
Talking about inspiration, what inspires you to make this the love of your life? I don't know. Talking about your background, what inspired you right now nowadays? What is your most or the biggest inspiration?
I think the biggest inspiration is that there's so many people doing stop motion these days, and really creative people. I mean, look at all the productions that are going on. I mentioned earlier, you know, you mentioned who would I like to work with or whatever, and some of them are just people that you see their work, something special about their work. And I can mention Justin Rosh does amazing stuff, and he's been doing computer animations for 18 years ago. And now he's in recent years been doing stop motion. He's, you know, now he has his own studio that he's trying to focus on, you know, getting work in from people instead of working for, you know, a big studio like Leica. Now he's doing a lot of stuff like that. In fact, this armature is going to be animated by Justin. So I hope I did enough, you know, a good enough job for it that he'll enjoy animating it, because it's probably the most complex thing I can think about making this, because it's got 4 legs, you know, 2 arms, the head goes up and down. It's got to walk, you know, what's the gait look like on something like this? I think somebody like Justin will come up with something that's looks really cool. So I like to seek out, work with people that do really inspiring work themselves. So most of those people are like people that do the animation, storytellers. Misha Klein, another amazing armature maker. I just collaborated quite a few. I think I've done 5 armatures for him in certain different projects. Very inspiring to see somebody take the puppet that you built and really bring it to life, like Jean-Francois for I, Barnaby. I mean, you just make a mechanism. I could animate it and it look terrible. You put it in an artist's hand like Jean-Francois, Misha Klein, you know, Justin Rosh. They just do amazing work. It's like, wow, you know, that little piece of clunky metal thing that I made, they're able to bring life to it. I'm really inspired by that. It's amazing what they can do, especially these days. there's so many people doing it and so many good people.
I know they are turning something else. The stop motion is evolving to something that you can see a great thing with a small armature or a toy like Jim Randall that created the He-Man ads. It's really complex. In my point of view, I have seen the work, and it's something that blows your mind. No?
Yeah, I mean, these people do. That's a good way of putting it. They blow your mind. It's like they're so good. I mean, of course, I tend to like. Okay, I like the film. The film's really fun. Sometimes it's not. Isn't your cup of tea? I'll say. But when I start looking at behind the scenes of a film, I'll say Nightmare Before Christmas is one that I didn't like the character designs right at the beginning, but man, it really grew on me very quickly, and it's like one of my favorite puppet type animations. Very inspiring for something like that. Yeah.
And to close everything, is there a director or a studio that you want to work with nowadays that you dream of working with him or her?
Well, I say I'm enjoying the people that I'm working with now. Like I said, word of mouth. Justin gave my name out to John Sumner. He's the guy that came up with this character, and it was going to be just a short thing he was going to do for himself. He was going to hire Justin to do the animation. Now they're going to put it into a little film thing. So, Leica Studios, I can't really move away from where I live here. So I think it would be really fun to be in a creative environment like that with, lots of like-minded people that do really good work, and you can, bounce ideas off each other and like, oh, that's cool. I never thought about that. Or, they see something that you do and they get inspired by it. But yeah, it would be kind of fun to work for a studio like that. But I'm really enjoying working with the people I do work with because they're just small films, and it's not like 100 people working on it. You're just one person doing a small element of it, but it's still, I built this thing, and it didn't take, 50 people to do it. It's just a collaboration between the director and myself, basically. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's something that you have the time and all the moment on that armature, a specific armature. You can focus only on that thing, no? And you have all the patience and the love in that armature specifically. No? I guess that's something important for you.
Yeah,
that's a thing that changed.
Use the word patience all the time because only because on my own end, because when I work all day on something, let's say a few hours you work on something, the last thing you have to do is drill a hole in it or whatever, and you do it a through hole instead of a tapped hole, and then it's like you have to do the part over. So you have to get over the fact that you're going to make mistakes. It might be late at night, or I think I'll just do a little bit more out in the shop and do this. And then you come back in and tell my wife, like, all the things that I worked on today, I just messed up because I tried to do some more work on it at night when I'm probably tired, so yeah.
It's the part of the adventure, no?
It is. Yeah, it's an adventure. Just don't let it get to you so much. You just have to learn that things don't work the way you want them to all the time. And, you do have deadlines too. So it's like, if I had a little more time, I could do it this way, or I could do it better already. You think about it. As soon as you put it in the box and send it out, it's like, man, I kind of wish I did it this way. So you just try to remember that for the next job. Try to make it, make it more successful in the next job, perhaps. But yeah, you only have so much time, and it's as good as you can do it within that time, and you just have to be happy with it and move on.
Is there some words that you want to tell to people that is starting in armature building or in stop motion in this case? Some words that you want to say to your past Jim Randall?
One is, if it's something you really like, do it as soon as you can, because I'm at the point where it's like, I wish I had done this 30 years ago to where I am now. That life, life goes up and down. You don't know what life is going to send you your way. So at this point where maybe some people want to retire, I want to just keep making armatures, basically. Go out my shop, make something cool. So I think the main thing I would say is, if you have a love of something, just go for it. You can't just, think about it all the time or just talk about it all the time. You just have to learn, and you have to start with the basics. Once you get all the basics going, I think about when I silver solder something together. I used to hate the idea of silver soldering. So I cringe when it's like, I have to put the balls onto the rod now. I have to silver solder a lot of things. And the more you do, the better you get at it. And then it's like no big deal. You just learn it, and then you got that knowledge now, and you just move on. But I think just don't be afraid of stuff. Jump in on it. Don't put it off. Just start learning stuff if that's the thing you want to do. You don't know how good you're going to be too if you're just getting into it. And like I said, if I could speak to my younger self, I would just say, I wish I had done that sooner in life.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Welcome.
Thank you for giving us your knowledge, because you know many things about armatures. In Mexico, we are starting. There's something that there are not many people building armatures, and your knowledge is something that will inspire a lot. Please share more things in your Instagram and Facebook. It's something amazing to see the making of. Is something that I appreciate, and the people that did look in this will appreciate too, everything that you're making. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I hope people get inspired.
That's for sure.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Bueno, es momento de despedirnos. Muchas gracias a Jim por aceptar la invitación y compartir un poco de su conocimiento hacia todos. Esperamos que les haya gustado. Recuerden que pueden volver a todas las actividades, verlas en el festival stopmotion.com.mx. Pero si les pasó ver alguna o en nuestro canal, lo pueden buscarnos en YouTube o en las redes sociales, Stop Motion MX. Ahí nos pueden encontrar y pues sigan nuestras redes y a Jim en Instagram o Facebook. Muchas gracias a todos y esperamos que hayan disfrutado esta plática. Thank you, Jim.
Welcome. Thank you.